Anyhow, we did get to Surveyor. This is a painting of us over there by it, down inside the crater, 13 degrees, just like they told us before we went. This is a painting of mine that I like called Helping Hands, because as an astronaut, you have to learn to work by yourself. You have to learn to work as a team, and you have to learn to work with mission control and other people. It's a skill that everybody thinks they've got if you quiz them, but not very many people have it. I didn't have it when I got there. I thought I did. If I'd taken a quiz, I'd said, sure, but the guy that was the best, by the way, this is me. This is Pete Conrad. That is the guy that was the commander of the mission that got me assigned to his crew. And I'm going to tell you a story now. I told you I'd tell you the number one thing I learned at NASA. And he's the guy that taught me. He was a natural astronaut, a couple of years older than I was, but he had a feel for almost anything. If you were in a meeting and a subject came up that nobody knew anything about, and we all heard it and then gave our opinion, his opinion in general, not always, but in general, would be more accurate than ours or most of other astronauts. He had this feel for it, and you've met people like that. It's a gift of some kind, like a natural athlete. He was a natural astronaut, and he had this feeling. I wasn't. I learned from him. Thank goodness I met him. So let me back up a little bit. Here he is over here, and we're in the lunar module, and we're just talking to each other. We just made a landing, and we took them 20 minutes or so to reset mission control and our computer to try another landing. You do a landing, then maybe they'd fail some parts of it. You'd have to figure out what to do, and maybe you'd make a landing successfully, maybe you wouldn't, you abort. You'd have to rendezvous then with the command, all the things you needed to learn. So I'm in there, we make the landing. I'm sitting there, and I'm looking over at Pete, and I say to him, Pete, you know that briefing we had this morning, that technician, that engineer that gave us a briefing, you know, there's something about that guy. I don't think he's a good team member. I think we ought to maybe replace him. He said, why? I said, well, he just thought differently than we did. He seemed to know his stuff, but the way he explained it was so convoluted to our way of doing things that I don't think he's a good team member. And I was then, I'd be about this side of the lunar module. Pete was about here. It was pretty tight. So I'm looking over at him thinking he's going to say, good idea, Bino. I'm glad you mentioned it. It's a brilliant idea. But he didn't do that. He looked over at me and he said, maybe it's you that's not the good team member. Okay, think for a minute. How would you like it if your boss that you worked for a while, a couple of years, walks in your office one day and says, you're not a good team member? How would you feel? I felt that way. I was so embarrassed and I didn't know what to think. I can remember backing up as far as I could, which was about this far, and I was thinking, if there's another space program, I'm going to quit here and go there where somebody would appreciate me. I've been working with this guy 2 years. So I said, what do you mean? I'm a good team member. He says, you don't even know the first rule of being a good team member. And it's especially important if you want to be a leader of a team. I said, sure I do. He said, what is it? I said, well, you got to be loyal to the leader. That isn't it. You got to keep your eye on the goal. That isn't it. You got to work with everybody. That isn't it. I said, okay, what is it? He says, you've got to find a way to admire and care about all the other people on the team. I said, you're crazy. I said, we were in that meeting this morning. Maybe there was 50 people there. Okay, 10 of them I know because they talk a lot and they have some good ideas. And so I do like and admire them. Okay, another 30 of them or 35 or 38, they never say anything. I don't even know who they are. So I obviously don't like and admire them or dislike them. I said, but there's 3 or 4 in every damn meeting. And when they bring stuff up at the end of the meeting, it just holds it up. They've got some weird ideas. They should have brought it up earlier when we were talking about it. It just holds the meeting up. I said, I don't like and admire them. He said, that's your problem. You don't like and admire everybody on this team. Well, that was about the end of that conversation. But we had strained relationships for quite a number of days because this was on my mind all the time I was with him. He doesn't think I'm a good team member, okay? I began to pay attention to the astronauts in our office that were a lot more effective than I was. Some were not as effective as I was, some were more effective. And I began to think about what he said. And what I observed was that the astronauts that were more effective than I was knew everybody at the meeting. You know, they didn't know every single person, but they knew most people. And they treated them all with respect. They even respected the 5 guys that were bringing up this stuff at the end of the meeting. And they listened to them with patience and with as much concern and consideration as the key people that were at the meeting generally. And I thought, you know, maybe Pete's right. Maybe he's right. Maybe I've got to learn that. And so I began to change. It's hard to change yourself. Easy to talk about changing, hard to change yourself. So I began to try to do what he said. I didn't pay attention to people. I found out the 2 or 3 people I didn't like for the reason I took them to lunch. The minute I took them to lunch, I liked them. It was me all along. It was never them. It was me. To jump ahead to the rest of the story, why I'm recommending it to you. That changed my life more than anything I learned in the 18 years at NASA. I'm telling you. And the number one team member I've got is my wife. And then my kids are number 2 and 3 and that sort of thing. If I'm at home and I'm brushing my teeth and I say to myself, I asked Leslie to take the package to the post office yesterday and she didn't do it. Before my brain gets to she didn't do it, I say, she's my number 1 team member. And I'm not thinking admiring thoughts of her. And I quit thinking about that package she didn't take yesterday. And I say, you know, she really made me a great breakfast this morning. And I think about that. And that's true about my children. I get along great with my children, a lot better than I did years ago. And everything. When I meet somebody now, the first thought I have in my head, what can I admire and like about this person? I'm not going to say any more about it, but you can forget everything I said or say tonight except what I just told you, because that will make a change in your life for the better. I think of it all the time. I think of Pete, how he had the guts. Most astronauts wouldn't have told me that. They wouldn't have bothered. But he wanted me to be as good as I could be because he was great. Neil Armstrong would have never said that to me because he wouldn't cared that much, or most others. But that's why I was lucky to be with Pete. He cared. He cared about his teammate. And he went way out on a limb to tell me that. Really needed to know it. Anyway, I won't say any more about it. Off we go. Here's Al.